to Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. Hi, I'm Devora Krasnianski, and I've been coaching women for a long time in all areas of life, including women in midlife. Midlife is an exciting time, but it's also confusing, and so I invite experts to join me here as we unpack this crazy and interesting time of our lives. You can join our conversations on our Facebook group, Jewish Women Talk About Midlife, and on our website, Jewish Midlife. I just had a great conversation with Dr. Sue Futeral, a licensed therapist who has gone through several changes in her own life. Throughout our lives, there are changes, some good, like moving from single to married, from couple to family, and some changes are not as exciting, or some are even tough. But change is an inevitable part of life, and it can be challenging for many of us to embrace. Whether it's change in our personal lives, such as the many transitions of midlife, or a change in a career, or a change in our health or lifestyle, change can be daunting, and it can feel like we've been thrown into the unknown. But by understanding the different stages of change and learning how to navigate them, we can come out on the other side much stronger. Sue and I spoke about the stages of change and why some people have a harder time with change than others. She also shared some practical tips and strategies for navigating change successfully and for keeping motivated. So whether you're going through a major life transition or simply looking to make positive changes in your life, enjoy this episode as we explore the exciting and transformative world of change. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I'm talking today with Sue Futeral about all kinds of things, but I think we're going to focus mostly on change because I think midlife has so much change happening, or there's a lot of transitions, and how can we really lean into the change and not resist it? And so I'm really excited to be talking about this. So Sue, you want to just jump into the topic or talk a little bit about your life?
Yeah, thank you so much, Devora. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. We've been talking about this for a little bit, so it's definitely a big thing. The idea of change is so important. I am a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Maryland, and I have a private practice. So a lot of the therapy that I do with people really focuses on how to adjust to change. And it's also a very personal topic for me because I think we all change in life. You know, you start out as a single person, then you're married, and then, you know, you grow. And the next thing you know, there's a family and there's laundry. So, and then you watch your children change and grow. So really, all through life, we have many changes that we go through, and women probably have more changes than men in that sense. And then actually most recently, one of the things that's come up is that I was diagnosed with leukemia, and as many cancer patients go through, you know, chemo and radiation and surgery, lumbar punctures, like there's so many things that they do. So leukemia is a blood cancer, so I actually had to have a bone marrow transplant, and Ezer Mitzion coordinated that, and my donor actually was from Israel. So, so not only have I had a lot of developmental stages of change and psychosocial stages of change, I now have new DNA, so and new blood. So I feel like I'm quite qualified to talk about change. So the first thing we really should get into are the stages of change, and there's about 5 real stages of change, but I feel like there should be 6. And I will address. I'll go through the stages, and then I'll give a definition for each one. That might be the best way to approach this. The first stage of change is what we would call pre-contemplation. And that's when you think like, why should I change? There's not really a problem. So you start to think about, do I need to change? What is this pre-contemplation? And the second part would be contemplation, where you're actually thinking about maybe making a change. Then the next stage would be preparation, where you have to figure out how do you prepare for whatever the changes are going to be? How would you get there? And then, of course, is the action part, where you're actually making the change. Then is maintenance. Now, those are the 5 main stages of change. So pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And I like to add in the 6th stage, which is relapse, because it's very easy for people to fall into old patterns. And I think when we think about stages of change, this could be anything. This could be something very personal, is like how you're eating, if you want to lose weight, or you want to start an exercise program, or if you want to make sure that all your laundry gets put away. So there's so many things in life that we change. And some things we have control of and some things we don't. So, Hashem sort of, offers us the life that we have, and then we have to figure out how to adjust to it. So I have to tell you, for all of my things, personally and familiarly, in a family way, that my social work skills have really come in very handy in that sense. So let's talk a little bit about pre-contemplation. So pre-contemplation really focuses on why should I change? I don't have a problem. Where would I begin? And a lot of times at this stage in life, people are not really seriously considering changing their behavior or looking at, the patterns of behavior that they've developed. And sometimes people really aren't even aware that they need to change. If you have a kid who's messy and you want your house clean, you may need to address that with your child. And sometimes the kids think, well, you'll pick it up. Mom always picks up. Or in my case, Bubby picks up, so they don't have to do that. So it's good to teach children about, recycling and trash cans and things like that. So this pre-contemplation is where we're starting to help people figure out why they need to change, especially if folks are so unaware that they need to change. A lot of people don't recognize the need for change. And I think that's really like the one constant in life, that things change all the time. And sometimes people may feel that they've tried to change in the past. Especially moms, we think we want to lose our pregnancy weight. We want to get our energy back. We want to be able to have the perfect family and invite Shabbos guests over. But what do you have to do that? You have to make some changes in your lifestyle and in your attitude. So that's really pre-contemplation. And that would then lead up to the second stage, which is contemplation. So in contemplation, people are starting to acknowledge that maybe there is a problem. Sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. So at this stage of life, people are thinking, they're talking about the change. They're not sure if they want to take any steps towards making the change a lot of times, but people sometimes will start to seek out support. So this might be thinking like, I need a vacation. Maybe I should ask my friends where they've been. Maybe I should look on Facebook to see what might be good. So there's a number of things that people do in this contemplation stage. And this is a big one, because at pre-contemplation, people are still questioning if they really need to make a change. And during contemplation, they're getting really close to the movement. They're getting close to preparation. And of course, the next stage after this, after they're starting to seek out some support and figuring out what they need, perhaps from other people or from the real world, they get to the point of preparation. And preparation is the idea that the person admits it. This is when they've worked through the denial. People in the field of psychology look at things in different stages and phases, and they don't always have to go in order. So I like to use the example of grief, that Kubler-Ross gave us 5 stages of grief. And this is not always a loss or a death of a family member. It could be loss of bodily functioning. It could be loss of being a single person when you get married. It could be loss of the married couple when you become a family. So sometimes a loss can be a good thing, a loss and a change of status. But Kubler-Ross described 5 stages for us. The first is denial, like, why me? This can't be, can't believe it. Then there's anger. That could be anger with doctors, angers with Hashem, anger about your life situation. Next would come bargaining, where the idea comes into your mind, well, maybe if I give more tzedakah, bad things won't happen to me. Maybe if I daven more, I have more emunah, things will be different for me. The next stage is depression, where people start to feel a little bit melancholy and they feel a sadness that things are not working out the way perhaps that they had planned. And the last stage is acceptance. And I bring up these stages of grief because the fact that we have a psychological delineation of stages and phases is not unlike that of stages of change, that there are different stages that we go through in life. And I like that Kubler-Ross actually did that. We don't want to focus on grief so much, but since she had put that together, looking at the stages of grief, we now know that the next stage is the task of mourning. So if it is a person that passed away, then you think, the empty chair, who's going to sit in the chair that person took before? So in stages of change, we're doing something very similar. We're talking about the very beginning, where we're starting to think, do I need to change? Should I change? And that's why there's pre-contemplation. What's going on here? I might do it. I was thinking about it. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody else needs to change. What things do I need to put in place? And then after pre-contemplation is contemplation. And this, I really feel, is one of the biggest stages that are necessary. It's one of the most important things, because this is really where you're starting to integrate what's going to happen. You're starting to think ahead about the future, what are the things that are going to happen in life. And truthfully, we all can't make all these plans. We don't know what Hashem has in store for us. We have to accept whatever happens, but we can accept it. And it's not, and some people may see this as a test of bitachon and amuna, but the other part of this is that we have to take responsibility for our own attitude. So, as therapists, we often talk about, attitude with gratitude, that we want to be thankful for what we have. So in contemplation, we start to acknowledge, maybe indeed I do have a problem. Maybe there is something that needs to change. Maybe, I really do need to think about losing weight. Maybe I do need to start exercising. Maybe I do need to put the laundry away. Maybe I need to come up with a plan so I can get, all the kids out of the house on time. Or maybe I want to have things in order so we can have guests for Shabbos. So whatever it is you're thinking about, you need to figure out what's going to work for you. So this contemplation is you're starting to develop a lot of ideas. You've worked through the denial, as Kubler-Ross would have put it. You're acknowledging that something needs to change. There indeed is a problem. And we're starting to think about what's going to happen. So the next part, the next part is preparation. And I really enjoy this preparation stage with my clients because they've had some time to think about it. They've worked through some of the denial and some of the emotional baggage that comes with it. It could be anger, it could be jealousy, it could be a sense of pride. My house was spotless before I had 20 children living here, or something along those lines. So the preparation is like, I recognize that a change is needed, and how do I get there? This is really the stage for those that are ready and they're planning what it would take to make the changes happen. We want to start to delineate all of our ideas. And sometimes it's a decision tree. Sometimes it's, going somewhere to purchase items to put the pieces in place. If you want to invite people for Shabbos, maybe you feel like you need a nice Shabbos tablecloth. If you want to organize your laundry area, maybe you need to go to the dollar store and buy some little bins. So this is really where you're starting to figure out, what are the resources that I need? If I need to lose weight, maybe I could, I don't have time to go to a Weight Watchers meeting. Maybe I can do it on phone with Noom or something like that. So we have so many options and so many resources, and life is full of change, as we all know. So this is where we really start to put the prep things in place. Next is when we make the change, the action stage. Now, action is the fourth stage. We have pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, and action. So in this action stage, we start to think about not only the changes, but we're going to implement them, and we're going to chunk them. We're going to make little changes. I often use the term baby steps. If your house looks like someone's storage unit and you want to have guests on Shabbos, what's the first thing you need to do? You can't just say clean the house. Maybe the first thing is, let's look at this one corner, the entryway. Maybe when people walk in, we used to have some space in the closet if someone needs to hang up a coat. Maybe to have a little space on a table or a sofa so somebody can, put their tallest bag down. Whatever you feel those changes are, this action stage is where you're starting to implement those changes. You're taking those positive steps towards reaching the goal. And the goal, of course, is up to you. Sometimes I do help people in therapy set goals because there are therapy goals and there are life goals. And goal setting is critical. In fact, there's a whole other system of looking at goals that we call, SMART, a SMART process that they each stand for something. So there are a number of things that we do when we think about the action steps. Next is going to be the maintenance stage. This is stage number 5. This is when you can acknowledge, I bought the bins from the dollar store and things are put away. I've got the place cleaned up. We can, think about Shabbos guest. I needed to lose some weight. I've got a plan. I have a food plan. I have an exercise plan. I have my plan in place. And this part is now called maintenance. This is when things feel good. It feels nice. I've started to make changes, and the changes are to have a better life, or to make the life with the people that you're living with more comfortable. And people like the maintenance stage because they can start to see the accomplishments. And a lot of people use what we call a Gantt chart, or management by objectives. There's a number of options here where there's a timeline associated with it. I think probably one of the most intense time lines that people have is Pesach. How many people start on Purim, and when it becomes Purim, they're like Pesach cleaning, like they're, everything gets out of my life. All that matters right now is Pesach cleaning. And this is really when you've accomplished that part of maintenance, when you know that the skills are in place, you're changing your behaviors, and you're looking forward to making all the changes that you need to put in place. And you're going to start to get rid of some of those old habits. Now, this is like that extra stage that we talk about a little bit, and that is relapse. So stage number 6, and this is a little bit less formal than some of the other ones, but you don't want to fall back into the old patterns. Once you know that you've made changes and you've gone through the other 5 stages, that you want to make sure that you can keep going. Now, relapse prevention is normal. In fact, when I do, I work with people with substance use disorders as well, and addictions. And one of the first things we address with folks like that is that element of relapse prevention. What can you do to not let those normal patterns fall back into place? Because that's human life. That's human nature. That's the way we're wired. There is a comfort level. There's a reason why those old habits became old habits. And now we need to change that. So you want to be able to gain some new insights and some knowledge so that you can prevent those kinds of relapses in the future. So those basically are the stages of change, and that's how I help clients work through all the different things as people move forward and set their goals for making changes.
I love
So
that.
Devora, I hope that gave you a good summary.
That's a good summary, but I'm wondering about when the change isn't something that you really wanted to happen, whether it's, a loss of a job, for instance. So the change that has to happen, so there's no real pre-contemplation. Do I want to do this? I mean, you've got to do something. You have to really make the change. So how does that fit into this model?
Right. That's an excellent question. So if, God forbid someone loses their job and they have to work on the next job, you don't have time for pre-contemplation. That's not going to be a part of this. Don't forget, we don't have to go all of these stages in the exact right order. Contemplation has to be, what do I need to do to find the next job? The preparation is redo the resume, and then the action part is start sending out the resume. Tell everyone you know that you're looking for a job and you need a job. Then actually what you can do is go back to pre-contemplation. When the job interviews start coming in and people are responding to your resumes, or they're like, we'd like to talk, we'd like to meet with you, we'd like to have some ideas. This is when you can start to think about, what do I really want in my next job? Is it important to have benefits? Is it important to be off, for the Yom Tovim? Do I need to follow my kids' school schedule? Do I want to work in a setting where I'll have access to the internet or to computers? Or am I going to be sitting in a chair all day? So it's really interesting when an emergency situation like this comes up. That's such a good question, Devora, that this is really when we do go out of order, and we can revisit then the pre-contemplation and think, what do I want in the next job? So even though the resumes are out there, you may have options, and you can start to think about, what is the perfect job for me?
Some people get frozen in this change that got thrown at them, and they stay in denial. So what can someone do to actually pull themselves out of denial, or just really get really started on the preparation?
Yeah, that's very good, because that's true. There are a lot of people who do stay in denial. After all, Kubler-Ross told us that was the first stage, when there are issues around grief that come up. So for many people, it's really hard to work through the denial, and that's sometimes when you need a support person. I think for many people, that's when they come into therapy. There are many people that I work with who are there. They're stuck. And that denial is, you just really can't believe whatever it is going on. This is a shock to the system. And it can come in all different forms. It could be concern over something. So it is important, when you realize that you're in that stage of denial, that you start to think about what will pull you out of denial. If it means, for example, having a support system or a support group, or talking to your Rav. How many times do we tell people LOR? Talk to your local Orthodox rabbi, or whatever faith-based community you're in. But talk to your partner, your spouse, a sibling, parents. This is when people need to ask for some support, because that denial part is hard. Because whatever it is usually such a shock. It's very hard for people to break through, to figure out what it is that they're going, how they're going to move forward from there.
I think that goes together with acceptance, is like that really there's
accept the reality. I think some people have a harder time accepting the reality as it is. It shouldn't be this way. A lot of people don't have this challenge. And so that while that's, on the one hand, it's denial. On the other hand, it's just like, I'm not in denial that it's happening, but accepting it is, I think, is a separate piece if we're going to really parse them apart.
That's true. You're absolutely correct. There are so many people that have a very difficult time hearing about whatever the change is going to be, especially, there's different things in life that, sometimes change can be positive as well. If you're working with a little kid, I have a little granddaughter who's 2, and my daughter has already asked me if I would consider doing the potty training. And I was like, of course. I potty trained pretty much all the grandkids except for a little bit during that COVID time. So that's been kind of like a thing for me, like to potty train the grandkids. So it's a change, but that takes a lot of planning as well. You need charts, you need stickers. She's not a big fan of M&Ms, but that's how we did the potty training. So there's things that you have to put in place. So not all change is going to be negative, but some change is negative. And then it's a matter of adjusting and figuring out what your coping skills are. What are the resources? What is the allocation of personnel that you've got to put in place so that you can move forward?
And what are some things that people can use to actually motivate themselves? Not only like support, but like something more positive. Like support has a little bit of a negative, like there's something wrong, but what is something that someone can use to really propel them to make that change?
Oh, there's so many. I think that there's an infinite number of things that can be, help people to find that motivation. Actually, in psychology, we have a technique that's called motivational interviewing. It's not that different from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where we talk with people about what motivates you, what are the inner motivations, what makes you get out of bed in the morning, what are you passionate about. So sometimes when you're faced that you have to find a change, you need to figure out what is that inner motivation. So a typical example for many women in our society would be, the standard ones: losing weight, changing your eating habits, cleaning your house, taking care of the kids, very typical kinds of things, very stereotypical. And sometimes the motivation is, oh, I want to be like so-and-so. Sometimes people are motivated.
You just went mute. You just went mute.
Find a motivation.
Okay, so you have to finish that sentence again because you went mute.
I know, I'm right. One of the things that people need to find is their inner motivation. And there's so many things that can be motivated. I think when we think about motivating children, we often think about things like stickers, or we think about a goodie, a behavior chart, a smiley face, a little toy. But when you think about what motivates people, often it's money. Why do people go to work every day? Because we get money. If you went to work every day and your boss said, you did a great job today, I'm going to buy you a necklace, you'd be like, oh, that's so sweet. But that doesn't help pay the rent. And then you go to work the next week and your boss says, I like what you're doing, I'm going to buy you a bracelet. And you think, oh, bracelet's nice, that'll go with the necklace. What a nice, now I can really accessorize. But that's not going to pay the rent or the food bill. And then the third week you're at work, your boss is like, I bought you some jewelry, now I'm going to buy you a jewelry box. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is insane. How, it could be motivating. So it really depends if the positive reinforcer at the end of the motivator is good for you or not good for you. So that's kind of like a critical piece. So sometimes in psychology, we talk about motivational interviewing, which is a technique not unlike CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where we help people really explore what issues will help motivate them. Is it a matter of health? Is it a matter of amuna? Is it a matter of cleanliness? Is it a matter of organization? What will motivate you to change? And a lot of people have a hard time finding that inner spark. What are they passionate about? A good example, and again, drawing on psychology, and now we'll talk about behavioral psychology. There are stories that B.F. Skinner, he's one of the famous people who's a behaviorist. You do a goodie, you get a goodie. You don't do a goodie, you might get a baddie. There could be negative reinforcement. Skinner's kids, it is rumored from Canada that when his kids were little, they were total brats. They'd be like, I'm in school, I know the answer, I raise my hand, the teacher doesn't call on me, I'm not motivated to volunteer a response anymore. Same thing with like brushing your teeth. If I brush my teeth, who's going to give me a goodie? Is your dentist going to come to the house every time you brush your teeth and give you a sticker on your sticker chart? No, but maybe you won't have cavities at your 6-month checkup. So sometimes we have to do what we call zero-ordered task. And I'm not such a behaviorist, but I like to point this out to people, that there are things that we do where there may not be so much motivation, but there clearly may not be a positive at the end of it. It's like every time when you're driving, do we stop at every single stop sign, or do we do a rolling stop? The law says to stop. I live in Baltimore. The Beltway says 55. In theory, if you drive 56 miles an hour, you're breaking the law. What keeps you motivated to stay at 55 or under? So here's a funny story. My bubby actually got a ticket for driving too slowly on the Beltway. This was like a long time ago, but I always think that's kind of funny. So we have to figure out, are we motivated because there's punishment and we know if we don't do the right thing, Mr. Policeman's going to give us a ticket? Do we know if we don't do the right thing, if we don't lose weight, Mr. primary care physician is going to say, now I'm putting you on medicine, or now you're putting yourself at risk for a disease. So part of the motivation, we'd like to think as mature adults that we can find the motivation within ourselves to make the changes that we need to make to live our best life.
I think that some of us have a few changes that we would like to make. And I think that working on several at the same time, even though they're all wonderful, could be a little overwhelming. So how do we choose which one to work on?
That's a good question. Sometimes, sometimes that's a therapy question. It might be worth talking, with a professional person about sorting out the changes. And sometimes they all kind of go together. Sometimes one change can affect a change in something else. But it is important to be able to prioritize the changes, because once you start making one small change, it makes it that much easier to make the next small change.
Right.
In that sense.
If someone has decides my life was out of control and I need to eat properly, I need to get my house in order, I ought to look for a better paying job. And that's a lot of brain space.
Right. Absolutely. You're right. And that is really when it is a very good time to consider coming into therapy, or talking to someone, a support person or a good friend, where you can bounce these ideas off of and then figure out what things needs to change. The good thing is once you start making one change in your life, it's that much easier to make other changes. So if you know that you need to clean up and you need to organize and you need to lose weight and you want to find a better paying job, one of the best things to do is really just start within yourself, to make sure that, for example, you're brushing your teeth every day, to make sure that, you make your bed every day and you're putting your laundry away, and to go to the food store to buy the healthy food. And then you can cook the healthier food, and then you'll be able to lose weight, and then you'll have a little more energy, and then you can start to clean up. And if you have a little more energy and you're a little focused and you feel like you look better, you'll have a little more confidence to go in those interviews to look for a job. Because, sometimes money is the motivating factor. Like if all of this is to get a better paying job, but a lot of times it also has to do with time and scheduling. There are a number of different factors that can almost interfere with the decision-making trees that we're faced with. So that's a very good point. It is, I do like when people prioritize, and that's often the advice or suggestions that I'll offer to people, is that you start within yourself. What do you need to do to make the changes, the small changes in your own life, in your own circle, before you look at the bigger ones?
And I think sometimes an accountability buddy, or just depending who you're doing each thing with, like you can join a exercise class that has that social aspect also, while at the same time, whatever it is. So that there's and you can have different accountability buddies for different things and really bring yourself into getting other benefits as well. I think that having that social aspect can make you want to go to the gym.
Right. Absolutely.
And walking yourself may not do that for you as much.
Right. And, and having the accountability buddy, the 12-step programs, people with substance use disorders and addictions often go to these 12-step programs like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and NA, and so forth, GA. There's a number of them. And they ask people to find a sponsor and to work the 12 steps with that sponsor. And that's such an absolutely amazing method. In fact, when I work with people with addictions, I pretty much am pretty clear that I need them to participate in a 12-step program and to work the program and to find a sponsor, because I really feel like for many people, it helps to save their lives. Now, if the changes you want to make are not in a situation where it's life-threatening, then of course you can chunk it. You can go about things in a smaller way. But when you have an accountability buddy or a sponsor, someone besides an authority figure telling you what to do all the time, it's much more accommodating to your life to start to bring about these different changes that you want to put in place, even when it's multiple changes. Absolutely.
We all know that people who have some health issues and they are told to eat better, some people don't. And it feels maybe, and there's different reasons, but I think that it's worth exploring your reason why you don't. It's not like, it's not just eat healthier. It's like, why aren't you putting the time, effort, money to that? I think it's more than actually the eating. And it's also, while you could eat well at home, I think a piece of that is actually eating well when you're not at home and figuring out why you're not doing that.
Right. And one of the things that we see, especially in the therapeutic setting, is that there are people who sabotage themselves, that they have grown up perhaps in poverty or with food insecurity or sibling fights. There's often stories where you hear the big brother, takes your snacks, and when people start, and that can lead to all sorts of different food patterns or eating disorders, and it makes it harder to lose weight, or sometimes we just call it disordered eating. So there's a number of components, that people have to work through. And we like to look at the antecedents of all of that. We like to get, a good history for what happened first that got you in this situation that you're having such a difficult time following through to reach your goals. But there are many people who sabotage. I mean, half of America is overweight. It's
some people don't care yet. And like they don't care from the health side, and they think they're okay with the way they look, so they say, so they just don't care, and they aren't even trying to change. But there are those who want to change, or they know they ought to change. I mean, if you hear that you're going to have a heart condition if you don't start eating better, some people still don't do it. And there's much more behind it. It's not just eat better, or there's sometimes much more behind it. I think we really have to explore to that and not just make a plan. I think there's also that whole psychological piece to it that we really have to realize.
Right. And that's my job. I help people to explore those psychological aspects of what's going on. Why are you sabotaging yourself? Why are you not, taking advantage of this opportunity to change before you're on medication, or you're putting yourself at risk or your life at risk? And, what would happen to the other people around you that you love if you were unavailable to them?
So it's not just like just eat better or just go to exercise. It's not even just finding time. It's like, why aren't you finding time?
Right.
Why aren't you? And I think that going back to the real core is really what holds back some change. Is like, really, there's so much more going on than just finding time.
Right. Yes, you're absolutely right. And there's so much psychology involved, in change. Many people just go through life, and some people really are not insightful. Sometimes they don't know. A good example, if you're working with someone who has a neurodevelopmental issue, for example, or they're neuroatypical, people in the autism spectrum.
Right. But I'm talking about, and those people also need the support. I'm talking about some people who are just not on any spectrum. Life is so much, and there's so many, and then there's just so many changes they would like to make, whether it's from their family of origin, and now they see better. They see there's more options, or they got to midlife and they just need to be doing differently, and it's just very hard.
Right.
And it's not just hard because we don't know, because let's go with food, for example. There's so many different diets. There's so many options that alone could be overwhelming.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless, not trying any of them could be coming from the overwhelming of the choices, but it could be coming from something else as well.
Right. Dieting is such a good example here, because that's a very big change. One of the things I study actually is integrative medicine and nutrition. So the big thing right now is like food is medicine. But before this, not only was there Weight Watchers or Diet Workshop, but there were people who were into the keto diet and the Atkins diet and low fat diet and low carb diet. The South Beach diet. I mean, the list, it's almost endless. You go into bookstores, you can see many, many of these, but they all really, the bottom line is they're all emphasizing fruits and vegetables to replace sugary food. So if you want something sweet, think about reaching for a piece of fruit. But if you're, for example, a person with diabetes and you're eating, 10 pieces of fruit all day to satisfy a sweet craving, your blood sugars are going to go through the roof. So a lot of times it's a matter, it's a balancing act. It's being informed and what feels comfortable for you. Absolutely. I mean, there are people who study nutrition all the time and try to accommodate people with diseases. And another thing I would point out, that talking about people in midlife, that there are things that happen. For example, when women go through menopause, there's a lot of hormonal changes. And if you were the kind of person who could have, an ice cream every day in the summer, no big deal. When you go through menopause, that could be like 5 pounds a week. You know, your metabolism changes, your hormones change. So even though you may not have that thought that you would have to change your eating patterns and your food habits, it gets to the point where the response is yes, you do, because things are changing. Your metabolism changes, your hormones changes, and and sometimes people are taking medication. Sometimes people feel kind of lazy about making changes because the doctor will give me a pill. I'll eat a pill and I'll be fine. But that's not always the case. But many people, we do have that philosophy in our society where we talk about like better living through chemistry, and we talk about what can we do to not have to force so many changes. We don't want to have to feel coerced. A lot of people are very uncomfortable when they have to make a lot of changes. And it's not natural to have to make a change. People are resistant to change. That's human nature. That's why this is so critical to understand that there are changes to making a change or multiple changes in your life.
And some of them are inevitable. Like you said, like some people just their hormone, their whole metabolism changes, and it could be unfair, and it could be that all your sisters and sisters-in-law and all your classmates didn't have that, even though I don't think so statistically that's not going to happen. But
yeah,
but that's the change that's happening at you and for you, and going through that change is something that you're going to have to do for your health and maybe for the way you look and the way you feel about yourself, or not. Some people truly are content being whatever shape they are now, but it's still a health issue. And
absolutely.
The first thing is moving through the denial to acceptance so that you can actually prepare and do all the steps that we were talking about.
Yes.
And know that relapse will happen.
Yeah. And for many people, it's a very difficult concept to think about having those changes, like what you're saying. If your sisters are fine and your sister-in-laws are fine and the ladies at school are fine, like what's going on here? So absolutely. And that's when you have to work through that denial of why me. And, because
I also find that some people are finding is that they make the change, they get into this better habit, and then another change happens at them or for them, depending on how you want to look at it.
Right.
And then I just made the change and now I have to do it again.
Right.
And so that just seems so overwhelming again. But then we can look at, we made the change successfully the first time.
Yes.
We can just do it again. And I think if we were making changes throughout our life, we could handle change better. And then if it just came at us at this age,
perhaps, but because you're right, because there's something to be said about practicing, just being in that mindset that things will change. I mean, how many of us give our kids like a Shabbos treat and say, well, you can have it now, but don't forget when you get older, you're going to have to change. And it means nothing to a kid. To a kid, what they change, they might change their clothes, they might change sports, in the spring is lacrosse, in the summer is baseball, in the fall is football. I think that's how, so everybody sees change a little bit differently, and it depends on what you're changing. But when you're an adult and it's something personal, you want to be able to find the inner motivation and to think it through and to have, I use the term support system, but it could be, a study buddy, an accountability buddy, someone that can help you go through the different stages and phases of change.
Right. That's so important not to do it alone, because it just feels so much bigger just by the fact that it's alone. Even if maybe something that's a little bit more private, find that one or two people that you can talk to, because it just makes it much more manageable, especially if it's something that's a little bit more private, or some people found to be wanting to keep it away from the public. But I think trying to do something so big alone can be really hard.
Absolutely. That's true. And some things are really very private. So to share with you, I know that like your listeners will be hearing this, but for me, having a cancer diagnosis, that's not something that I share with my clients because it doesn't impact them. Nobody cares if you have a stomach ache or a headache. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. I have to take care of myself. If the chemo's too much, you eat Sofran. I like symptom management. But I think, there are things in my person, nobody cares about my grandkids. Nobody cares about, what the laundry looks like. So you have to figure out what are you willing to share with other people. And I think professionally, there's definitely a line. In terms of boundaries, what are you comfortable with? I guess a good example is like, I'm a mother-in-law. And when you're in a mother-in-law role, it's very different than being a mom. And
Right.
that's, it's a change. So sometimes our roles change. It may not be a physical thing, but, food is always such a good example because so many people study food, and some foods that some are healthy for one person are not good for another person.
I think your example of being a mother-in-law is a very good example, because the change of the role of your adult child in your life, and knowing what to let go of and not be so involved, and maybe you should be more involved, and that also changes based on the adult couple that are
Right.
your children and child-in-law. So that could change many times depending on what they want, because
Right.
if we come too enmeshed in their life, that's not good for us or for them or for our relationship with their family
Right.
or their grandchildren.
Right. And actually, with the mother-in-law example, I think that there's a difference being a mother-in-law to a daughter-in-law compared to being a mother-in-law to a
Sure.
son-in-law. There's a big difference there. And of course,
Each
depending
one
on
and each couple is different.
that's right. That's right.
And
It's
something
not
that you
just a
try at
gender
the
thing.
beginning may not work afterwards. And I think that's one of
Right.
those examples that may be a little bit more private, that you don't want to talk about to too many people, because you never know who's going to find out about the dynamics. And again, that's very sensitive with the children or even with your adult children. So
Right.
that's something that I would think that would be in the category of keep it a little bit more private, 1 or 2 people, and that's it. Not bring in the whole family. But if you want
Right.
to eat properly, you might want to bring in the whole family to know not to serve you the
Right.
ice cream and the brownies.
Right. So a good example is like when there's an addiction going on, that's actually when you do bring in the whole family to offer an intervention. So we do that, with substance abuse disorders. And there are people who do have food addictions. And I know in the day and age when we're talking about so many people with eating disorders and disordered eating, or just the lack of knowledge. But you have to be aware of things. And sometimes it is worth it to bring in the whole family if you know that someone is at risk for disease X because of poor nutrition. You want to do what you can do to make people feel healthier.
And also give people the role to be helpful, so they
Right.
don't do what's wrong. Like some people, I grew up with everyone offering food, and that's how they want to be a hostess, is keep offering food and more dessert. And you didn't have your ice cream yet. You didn't have, just know that I don't want your ice cream. So I think letting the hostess know that it's not about her delicious ice cream, which I so enjoyed for 30 years. I can't be eating that, or I don't want to be eating that anymore. So kind of bringing her into it, so that she doesn't say that in front of everyone, have the ice cream and have some more ice cream. And then you having to say in front of everybody, but I don't want to. So kind of saying it in advance, I think, is one of the ways to mitigate some of that change. And get the support that you need.
Right.
So I think that really planning this change and planning who's going to be affected by your change is also very important.
Right. Right. And I like to think that the person who's going to be the most affected by the change is yourself. Most of the time when I work with people and we talk about change, it's for that person. Now, there are many times where one person wants to help their spouse change or a child change. Maybe there's people who want to help change their mother-in-laws,
A midlife, it's too late to change your mother-in-law.
Midlife, one never knows, right? But the one that you can change, and the truth is, you really can't change other people. You can help. I mean, when people come over and I know that somebody has whatever, a potential cardiac situation or potential diabetes, I can serve a very low carb meal, but I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, here, eat this. I made this. It's only, I shouldn't say that. Actually, I have done that. I've made coffee for people and say, oh, do you want whipped cream in it? It's like 1 carb. So I do find myself making comments like that. It's, it sort of seems silly, but maybe that's my way of letting people know that, this is like a little treat that's not super fattening.
Right.
And whipped cream is such a fun treat in coffee. Apparently Starbucks does that all the time. I think that's where it kind of came from. So now, like, everybody in the neighborhood, has whipped cream on milk days. So anyway, but there's so many interpretations of change, and like, we can't change other people. You can be kind to other people, you can be compassionate, but you have to know what those boundaries are, because the only person who can make a change in their life is themselves.
Right. About your own change, but sometimes our own change impacts other people as well. If we go back to work, it impacts the whole family. So
absolutely.
There's definitely, ways to bring that up into conversation, and how to make it work for other people. Even though we want the change for ourselves, or if we want to eat healthy and only have healthy food in the house, it still impacts other people. So it's about taking that into consideration as well.
Right. That's true. That's true. And sometimes you have to pay attention to like the food shopping needs or what people want. For example, if somebody wants something sweet, hence my whipped cream example, that it's like low calories and low carbs. But there are many examples of what's good for some people and it may not be healthy for someone else. A good example is like quinoa. If you have somebody with some GI problems, you might think, quinoa is like the best thing ever, but it's a seed. And if you have a person with ulcerative colitis or diverticulosis or some, whatever, quinoa is not going to be good for them.
Right.
So you don't want to serve food that's going to send somebody in the ER, but you'd like to think that most people are aware enough of the food that they're eating, that the nutritional value, and you want to be sensitive to what other people around you, especially if it's a family setting. But it has happened. It's happened to me and many people that, you're out for a Shabbos lunch or Purim Suda or whatever, a meal, and people are serving food that other people would find healthy, but it's not good for you. And so you have to use your own self-control to figure out, what's appropriate to eat or not appropriate to eat, or to say no thank you.
You're really going to have, if you have celiac, what's not good for you. Like you really know once you know that. But also the flip of that is like if you decided you want to eat healthy and your husband's not there yet and he really still wants whatever, you have to kind of work it out. Not saying that it's not coming into our house ever,
right,
because that's trying to change him. It's not only because it's going to be easier for you not to have the food, which of course it's easier not to have the temptations, but there's still other people in the house. So I think that consideration is something also important, that yes, you're the one making the change, but don't make the change on other people.
Right. So you have to be considerate to other people. And if it's your change for you, on one hand, it might be easier not to have all sorts of, foods that would not be good for you in the house, but maybe you can have like one or two things at a time in a special place, for your spouse or for whoever the person is who wants that food that is not good for you. Or there's
have a conversation about it. Maybe they could support you, or maybe they could allow for you to hide that from yourself.
Right.
It's not in the pantry, even though it's more convenient for them that it to be straight up in the pantry. Maybe you can kind of support each other's change, or he can support your change if whatever it is. But I think it's the conversation, and so that's why I'm really glad that we had this conversation, because what we're really getting at is it's not just the action; it's really that whole psychological piece, that whole support piece, that when there's a change that has to happen. And sometimes the change doesn't really stick because it's not just the change, it's all those other pieces that really have to be in place too.
Right. You're absolutely right. And compromise, communication is really the key here. So we're really talking about in a family setting is the issue of communication. How can each partner support the other one, whether they're making a food change or a job change or a driving change or a carpool change, whatever the change would be. Absolutely. Communication is critical.
I'm so glad that we actually broke down the whole aspect of change, like the steps of change and the support that we need to change, so that really if someone really wants to make a change, they have a lot more of an understanding of what it goes into the change, and really find support for all the different parts of it so that they can really hopefully be really successful in that change. So thank you so much, Sue. This was a really great and important conversation.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me in another fascinating conversation about midlife. If you'd like to reach me, Devora Krasnianski, to talk about your midlife or anything else, you can reach me at jewishmidlife@gmail.com. You can also find us on our website, jewishmidlife.com, and follow us on Jewish Midlife on Instagram or Facebook, and join our conversations in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/JewishWomenTalkAboutMidlife. And share what we're doing with your friends and others in the midlife phase.